Nedarim Daf Vase contains three separate sugyas. The first sugya is a discussion of four types of pesachs, ways to be matir and neder that we do not do. We don't hold if they're not valid as a pesach. The Gemara will bring the four. Then the Gemara will have a little bit of a gadata about the wickedness and the severity of anger. Then the Gemara will talk about somebody who makes a neder by Hashem's name, if that is something that you can be matir with a pesach or not. Let's begin the Gemara. We have four types of pesachim which are somewhat dubious, where the person doesn't really regret the neder that he made. He just got scared because you're going to scare him into it. The Gemara is going to say we don't do these. So the Gemara brings them. The first one comes from a story where the grandson of Rabbi Yanai Saba, Rabbi Yanai, the old Rabbi Yanai, came before Rabbi Yanai Saba with a neder that he made, and Rabbi Yanai said to him, if you would know that they open up the records of your actions in Shemayim and they start checking through it carefully when you make a neder, would you have made the neder? Because we know that when a person makes a neder, he seems to be holding himself on a higher level, so they start checking to make sure he's doing the basics. As we see in the pasuk in Mishlei, Moikesh Adam Yala Kodesh V'achar Nedarim Levaker. It says V'achar Nedarim Levaker. After somebody makes a neder, he goes through a close inspection. Well, you would have known that inspection would have made the neder. He said no, and based on that, Rabbi Yanai was matir him. The Gemara says we don't rely on that. We don't use that as a pesach, as a reason to show regret and that a person made a neder under false circumstances. That's not really false circumstances. Now, another type of pesach we don't use, the Gemara says, comes from Rabbi Bar Chana named Rav Yochanan, who said that Rabbi Gamliel made a pesach for an old man. Somebody came to him asking for a pesach for a neder, and he said, quoted the pasuk to him, Yesh boite kemarker escher v'loshan chachamim marpe. So Yesh boite, somebody who speaks, meaning somebody who makes a neder, is kemarker escher, deserves to be stabbed with swords because of the wickedness of making nedarim. But l'shan chachamim marpe, but chachamim can make a pesach, they can get the neder off, so that heals him. So he said to him, if you had have known that this is the wickedness and the strictness of making nedarim, would you have made the neder? He said no, when he was matir the neder based on that, but again, we're not going to do that. Now, the third type is machlokes. What exactly is the, how exactly the Pesach works? So the Gemara quotes a brisa of Rabbi Nosson. The brisa has two halves, and the question is, which half can we use, which half can we not use? So the first half of the brisa is that somebody who makes it, is that Rabbi Nosson says in the brisa, somebody who makes a neder, it's like he built a vama outside the Beis HaMikdash, a mizbeach that's outside the Beis HaMikdash, which is also, you're not allowed to do that. That's the first half of the brisa. And the second half is that if he keeps a neder, or if he violates it especially, it's like he went ahead and he was makar of a carbon on that mizbeach, on the bama that he made outside the Beis HaMikdash, which he's not allowed to do. Now, the Rishonim explain the reason for the comparison is that he thinks by making a neder he's doing something extra and that it's a mitzvah. It's just like making a mizbeach outside the Beis HaMikdash where he thinks he's doing something extra and it's a mitzvah, but it's not. It's too much. It's not what a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. So again, that's the comparison to making the neder, and if he keeps the neder, or if he violates the neder, so that's going even further, and it's actually bringing karbanos outside the azara. So obviously, the first half is not as bad as the second half. The first half is just building the bama. The second half is actually being makar of karbanos outside the azara. So the question is, which of these can we use, which of these can we not use? So there's two versions of this. So Rav Kahana's version is that the first one we do use. The second one is a machlokes Abai and Rava. Abai says we use it, and Rava says we don't. According to the second version, which is Rav Tavyumi, he says the first one is where the machlokes is about building the bama. That's the machlokes. Abai says we use it, Rava says we don't. And the second one we do not use. That everybody agrees to. Either way, the first one is more likely to be used than the second one. The Gemara says so we don't use not the first one, not the second one. We don't say if you would have known that it's like building a mizbech, would you have made the neder? We don't say if you would have known that it's like being makariv a carbon outside the azar, you would have made the neder. We don't use either of those. Now the fourth one is one that's brought by Shmuel. Shmuel says is that he has a source that says even if somebody who keeps a neder, he's still called a rasha. Rabbi Avo says it's based on the pasuk. It says if you stop making the nedarim, then you won't have any more sins, which implies as long as you're making the nedarim, it is a sin. As a hekesh from the word sechdal, from the root chadol, to a different pasuk that says shem rishayim chadlu, that it's wickedness to be associated with the word chadol. So kisechdal by nedarim links to shem rishayim chadlu rogez, and therefore that is also that's hinting that somebody who makes Nedarim is called a Rasha. Rabbi Yosef says we saw this in the Mishnah also, as we saw back in the first parak that said Kinidrei Ksherim is not a Neder at all. Ksherim, kosher people, don't make Nedarim. Somebody says Kinidrei Rishayim, that is a valid reference to a Neder, because Rishayim do make Nedarim. That's true for Nazir, Carbon, and Shua as well. Now the Gemara goes on to its second sugya, which is about anger. The pasuk we just quoted was Shem Rishayim Chadlu Rogez, talking about anger. The Gemara now gives some Magadata about anger. So the Gemara quotes Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani and Rabbi Yosef, and anybody who gets angry, all types of Gehenim have control over him, like it says, remove anger from your heart, and then you will remove Ra'ah, evil, from your flesh. Ra is a reference to Gehenim. The Gemara says, like it says, Kol Pal Hashem L'Manei V'Gam Rasha L'Yom Ra'ah. A wicked person finds himself in the day of Ra'ah. So that is Gehenim. Not only that, says the Gemara, but all types of the underworld control him. Like it says, V'Nas Hashem L'Chol Leiv Rogez B'Chilyon Einayim V'Davon and Nefesh. Somebody who has a Leiv Rogez, a heart of anger, will have Kilyon Einayim and Davon, Nefesh, closing eyes, and sadness of the soul. What is it that closes the vision and causes sadness to the soul? So we would say that is the underworld, that is the Tachtonios. More quotes a story. Ulu was traveling to Eretz Yisrael, and two people came with him from Chozah. While they were walking together towards Eretz Yisrael, one of the two guys got angry at the other guy, and he shachted him, he killed him. Ulu was afraid that he was going to be next, so he said, you did good, you did good. And that guy said, yeah, I did, and he went and he actually opened the wound so that the person would die fast. Now, when Ula arrived in Eretz Yisrael, he went to speak to Rav Yechon, and he was upset that he may have been guilty of helping a sinner, helping this murderer, because he agreed with what he did. So he said, was that a terrible thing that I did? Am I a machzigad over Avera, helping a sinner? So he said, no, you needed to save your life. It was sakanas nefasha, so it's okay what you did. But Rav Yechanan, however, was surprised that someone could get so angry at somebody in Eretz Yisrael. How could it be? Didn't we just learn that there is a special, that anger happens in the Chutz La'aretz? You don't really find anger like that inside Eretz Yisrael. So Ul explained at that time we were still in Chutz La'aretz. We had not yet crossed the Yarden while we were traveling, and therefore we were still in Chutz La'aretz, and that's why he was able to get to that level of anger. But of course, had he been in Eretz Yisrael, he would have not. Mar says further, the Rabbi Bar Huna says that anyone who gets angry, even the Shechina is not important to him. Like it says, Rasha Kegeva Apel Yibal Yidroish Ein Elikim Kol Mizivoisa, somebody who has his anger rising, doesn't seek Hashem in all his plans, and he therefore doesn't have any importance, doesn't attach any importance to the Shechina. Here Rabbi Difti says he forgets everything that he learned and he becomes foolish. Like it says, Kikas B'chei Kesilim Yenuach, anger resides in the heart of the fools, and it says Ksil Yifrosh Ivelis, that the fools are the ones who explain with foolishness. Says the Gemara further, Rav Nachman Yitzchak says it's also clear that his sins are greater than his mitzvos, like it says Ubal Chema, Rav Pesha, somebody who is full of anger, is mostly sinful. Now the Gemara says something surprising. The Gemara says Rav Ada, named Rabbi Chanina, if Klal Yisrael had not sinned, they would never have had any svarim other than the Chamisha Chumshei Torah and Sefer Yeshua. Chamisha Chumshei Torah contains everything we need to know, and Sefer Yeshua divides up Eretz Yisrael, so we know which shvatim are where and who gets what. But all the rest was just to counteract Klal Yisrael's rishos, the Musar of the Nevi'im, and everything else that's discussed there. If not for all our mistakes, we would not have had need for any of those svarim. The Gemara quotes a pasuk to support that, Ki b'rov chachma rov ka'as, that all the chachma, all the svarim that we have is a result of all the anger that we had caused with our averos. The Gemara now returns to its topic of being matir nedarim, where we look for a pesach in the nedarim. The Gemara says if somebody makes a neder by Hashem's name, he says be'elkei Yisrael, then we do not make ourselves available to try to find a pesach for him. That severe a neder we don't want to make pesachim for, we're not going to be matir. With one exception, the Gemara says somebody who asers hana on his wife because he suspected her of something. He said to her, you can't have any enough for me, and he makes a neder b'lekei Yisrael because either he was under the impression that she stole his wallet or that she hit the kids. And then it turns out that she didn't really steal the wallet and she didn't hit the kids. In that circumstance, we are willing to be matir the neder for him, even though he was no there by Shem Shemayim. Now the Rishonim are disturbed here that if he made a neder based on a mistake, the neder is not chal at all, and therefore there is a number of different girsais which they discuss or try to make it fit, perhaps. That it could be that it really was true, and then he wants to, but we are matir the neder anyway in order to preserve shalom bayis. Another more incidents that happened. Related, Gemara says that somebody came to Rav Asi looking for a Pesach to be matir a neder that he made, and Rav Asi said, "By whom did you make the neder?" He said, "By Elokei Yisrael." He said, if you would have made the neder by Mohi, which as we learned in Mishnah earlier is a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu, then I could have been matir for you. Some Rishonim have the gersa, even then I could not have been matir for you. Now that you made it by Elokei Yisrael, I cannot be matir for you. Second story, the Gemara quotes Rav Kahana went to Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef invited him to eat something, but he very emphatically said no. By Murray Kula, by the master of the world, I'm not going to eat anything. It means he made a neder that he wasn't going to eat anything. Obviously, Rav Yosef was insisting that he should. And Rav Yosef made a neder right back at him. And he also said, by Murray Kula, you're not going to eat anything. So Gemara says, I understand why Rav Kahana made the neder. He was trying to end the conversation, but what did Rav Yosef make a neder? He said he was asking him to eat from him after he asked himself to eat. What was that for? So the Gemara says, no, that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying that I'm making a neder, you're not going to eat from me. He was saying if you made a neder by Elokei Yisrael, then you're not going to eat anything because there is no way for you to get that neder off. The Gemara says that Rava said to Rav Nachman, the halacha is we do matir nedarim because of just charata, just because of regret, that the person regrets that he ever made the neder, even if he doesn't have a pesach, he doesn't have a circumstance under which he didn't realize. And the second thing is that we do matir nedarim that are made by Elokei Yisrael, by the Shem Hashem. Now the Gemara quotes an interesting incident related with Rava and Rav Nachman. The Gemara says that Rava was praising to Rav Nachman, he was praising Rav Sechira, telling him that he was a great man. So Rav Nachman said, okay, when he's around, bring him to me. I want to see him. So he brought him, and Rav Sechira at the time had a neder he was looking for a heter for. So Rav Nachman started looking for a Pesach to help him. So he said, would you have made the neder if you would have known about X? So he said, yes. If you would have known about Y? He said, yes. He tried this a few times. He tried to find a Pesach for him, and he couldn't. So Rav Nachman became upset, and he said, go home. So Rav Sechira went home, and he saw that he had made Rav Nachman upset, so he said, okay, there's my Pesach. If I would have realized that the neder was going to make Rav Nachman to be upset at me, I would not have done that, because we know he's supposed to be Tiferes L'Iseh, Tiferes L'Ben Adam, supposed to be kind and pleasant with people, and I'm causing Rav Nachman to be upset, so I never would have made the neder, and that was how he was matir the neder that he made. Now the Gemara has a similar incident where somebody tried to use a similar type of heter. Moshe says Rav Shimon Barebi had a neder he wanted a heter for. He came to the Chachamim, and they also tried finding psachim. Did you have this in mind when you made the neder? Yes. Did you have that in mind? A few times they tried, they couldn't find, and they were pacing back and forth from the sun to the shade, from the shade to the sun, trying to find the heter. And he saw that they were very much in pain, disturbed, and were not being able to find the Pesach for him. So then Butnis, the son of Abba Shol ben Butnis, said, if you would have known they would cause their abundance so much pain, would you have made the neder? He said no, and based on that, he was matir the neder.